great. It's great to be here. And Vimal, do you still have the low-cost sensor for PM 2.5 sitting out your window at IIT Gandhinagar?
Yes, I have.
Yep. Yep. So you're one of the experts now, just like the rest of us, I think, right?
No, they are getting data every day from us, our
Yep.
sensor at IIT Gandhinagar.
Yeah. Okay. Talk about that in a minute. Real quick background about myself. My main areas of research are several fold. More recently, and this is just a quick overview of my background, upper left panel, I think I've been doing a lot of environmental and human health data analytics. I think that's really important for the future of environmental science and engineering. I'll mention that as we go clockwise in the middle. As Vimal had mentioned, I'm also working on renewable energy and air quality. I'll mention that. I do some lab experiments. That upper right corner is using titanium dioxide, which is a photocatalytic compound, and seeing if that can readily degrade compounds. So I do lab experiments. Bottom right, I often go to really, really clean places as well. I'm super interested in how pristine places are affected by air quality. In this case, this is a Greenland ice sheet. I've not been doing too much research on that, but that's how I got my start. Boy, 25 years ago, hard to believe. In the middle, going counterclockwise around, is an undergraduate research project. I do lots of undergraduate research hands-on projects. I'll discuss that later, and this was a group in China. And that lower left corner is something we've been working on for about the last 10 years, which is low-cost sensors, which I'm going to talk about as well. One thing I'll mention, and Vimal has been to my house and visited, is I think, as I tell everybody, I think leading a balanced life is super important. And I love the outdoors, and just a few of these pictures. That's the upper left corner is the state that I live in now. That's the western part of the state, which is mountainy and has beautiful rivers. As you go clockwise, that's my dog and cat. We live kind of in the woods. It's a very, very rural area, kind of where we live. And upper right corner is my brother, my little brother. He's a few years younger than me. I'm not supposed to call him my little brother anymore. He's in his 50s. And bottom right is I do lots of running and exercising and things like that. And the middle bottom right is my wife, Michelle. Been married for 33 years. And that's at the east coast of North Carolina, which is very naturally beautiful. And then bottom left are my two 19 and 17-year-old kids, Lucas and Mia. So I think throughout my career, I've tried to keep a balance. I know, as all you know, who are people who are trying to get a lot done in their lives. Life is very hectic, but I think it's very important to keep a balanced life and enjoy yourself. Okay, so first, what I'm going to do in my talk is I'm going to kind of introduce what I study a lot of, particulate matter and its importance. And I know some of us have seen a lot of these slides. I'm going to go through them kind of quick and give my impression of them. This is a global burden of disease. And these are disability adjusted life years, or the percentage of years that either you suffer morbidity or die early from mortality. And what you can see is for air quality, there's 3 of these things in the top 10 related to particulate matter. There's tobacco smoke. That's that first arrow. Oh, I just realized that. Yeah, I can have my cursor. There's here household air pollution, solid fuels, and ambient particulate pollution. These are some of the leading factors of causing death globally and disability adjusted life years. And you look at this is kind of interesting. This is, if you look, this is a global estimated deaths on the y-axis, and oh, shoot. And this is air pollution. It's about 7 million deaths. These are several different ways to estimate them, water, and so on. And one thing that's interesting that I often say, and I don't think it's really fair, but you know, I often, like the rest of my friends here who may be educators, is, you know, we study air and water, and I say, well, if you're interested in human health and you're interested in the environmental pollutants that influence human health, you should be studying air pollution according to this, because air pollution even has much higher impact than water. I'm not so sure this is true. These are rough estimates. I think that as we go on, we'll find out that it's the combination of these two things. It's very dangerous. And as everybody knows, in India, there's the air quality is really bad, and it's been estimated maybe between 1 and 2 million deaths in India, accounting for about 18% of the deaths in India. So I think, as everybody knows, I don't have to tell everybody in India that the air pollution is bad, and a lot of people are getting really sick from it. You know, and so as I wrote this was when? This was yesterday. So this pops up yesterday. And again, people ask me about this all the time, about India and air pollution. And this was just the other day. Air pollution in India, it's about 300 to 500 micrograms per cubic meter of particulate matter. And we consider about 10 to be the healthy zone, and it's above 10, we consider it starting to get unhealthy. So really unhealthy. And here's the Taj Mahal. I'll come back and talk about that. I did find it interesting that they showed a picture of Taj Mahal talking about Delhi's air pollution, but that's all right. This is a picture just the other day of the Taj Mahal. Super hazy. And when we think about the sources, and I have a few more introductory slides, I think we know this is in October, and I said last winter in India. It's not last winter. I must have shown this in 2013 and found the slide. But so you see these, these red spots where there's fires, and of course super haziness, and that's kind of where we are now. And I think everybody knows that these fires and burning of crop stubble and residue creates poorer quality. Also, there's been a lot of work and lots of people working on household cooking and household heating, and that, of course, is one of the huge factors of air pollution in India. And then we've done some work, which I'll talk a little bit about later in my talk. Also, as everyone knows, in India, there's a lot of trash and refuse burning, local trash and refuse burning, and we've done some work on that. That's a pretty substantial impact on air quality. And what's interesting is here's some filters that were collected around trash and refuse burning, and you can imagine that there's all sorts of different compounds in these trash and refuse. And you can just tell from the colors of these filters, there's all sorts of different things on these filters. And although I won't go into the details of it, you can analyze these filters and find many toxic compounds. And this was a paper we wrote with our Indian collaborators several years back that was in the news. If you zoom in, and so I want to say that I think on one hand, this talk will be some very general things, and then on the other hand, there's going to be some very specific things, but I'll try to keep the specific things kind of more generalized as well. But just in case you don't know it, this is from IIT Gandhinagar. This was a slide that was sitting next to solar panels. These are particles that deposited over about a week to a surface, just sitting there in IIT Gandhinagar. This is 50 micrometers, so a hair, it's about 1 to 5 micrometers. So you look, the interesting thing about all these particles is they're all different sizes, all different shapes, and made of all sorts of different stuff. So if you're interested in health, a lot of us know we worry about the size of these things, how deep they get in your lungs, and what they're made of too, and how toxic they are. This is dust. There's some pollution particles in here. There's some biological particles in here as well. What's interesting, just to show you, so these are some particles from, you can take those particles you just saw and we collect them and we can zoom in on them, and man, they're pretty crazy looking. This is a 10 micron zinc oxide particle. It's probably fly ash. And what happens, and this bottom one is gypsum, that's calcium sulfate. So that's probably dust that had some sulfur from power plants getting out of those particles. And then when they're analyzed, they're put in a vacuum, so it takes all the water away, and then it creates these salts. So these are super cool. You can look at these all day long, tons of particles, composition varies widely, and the sizes and shapes are all different. Pretty interesting. So I just want to mention, so you go back to that slide that I had shown, and I'm going to say a couple things about some past research before I jump in to the topic of today. Is the Taj Mahal again, and of course I tell, when I show this to people in the West, I say I typically say that I've been a lot of places, and usually when I go somewhere, and we've seen in the pictures and the movies so many times that you go to that place and then you see the thing you've seen a million times and it's not so striking. But of course the Taj Mahal is opposite to that. It's something we've all seen a lot in pictures, but it's amazing when you go see it. And you can almost imagine that the Taj Mahal, those brown combustion particles that I showed you and dust are constantly depositing. You saw a super hazy picture, and we know that those particles are getting onto the surface. They can react with the surface. They can change the color. It's hard it's really hard to infer a color from a surface, well, from a photo, I should say. But to me, there's a slight brown tint to this. The Taj Mahal is supposed to be incredibly white. We did some projects in the Taj Mahal. This one on the left, if you see that left image, hard to tell, but on the upper 2009 image when I was there, you see that they're scaffolding up, they're cleaning the Taj Mahal. The right didn't come through too good, but it's brown. The left, they're cleaning. It's a very painstaking process. On the right there are some of my collaborators at the Archaeological Survey of India, and Jamie Shaw at the University of Wisconsin. And then there is Sachi Tripathi and Anand Gupta from IIT Kanpur, and we did a project, and we figured out exactly how these pollution particles were affecting the surface of the Taj Mahal, discoloring the Taj Mahal that was covered while it was actually, believe it or not, in National Geographic magazine covered that. One of the themes that we started to learn is that in a lot of places, and this is totally in the US as well, in Western countries, is the air is really bad, but we just don't have enough monitoring to let us know how bad the air really is. And we know that the air concentration of particulate matter varies a lot within urban environments and within rural environments too. So it became clear to us that there was just total lack of making of the right measurements to measure PM 2.5. And we just didn't know a lot about the spatial variability of PM 2.5, particularly in places like India. So just real quick, the way that PM 2.5 is typically measured is this is a US EPA station. It's air conditioned in there. There's a bunch of different instruments in there, but typically the kind of instruments that we use, this is ozone, but on the left, this is an instrument that measures PM 2.5. Typically it costs $20,000 to $30,000 for the instrument. Then it has to go in this nice enclosure, and that enclosure has to be very carefully maintained, and has to be often maintenance is important. So it has to be a real expert taking care of it. So typically it costs between $100,000 and $200,000 a year just to have one instrument measuring PM 2.5. There's other ways to measure PM 2.5 in this lower right panel. I shouldn't say PM 2.5. There's other ways to measure haziness. There are satellites. You can use satellites. Satellites basically look at the column and the light scattered back at them, the radiance, and then try to figure out what maybe the total loading was in the atmosphere. And then at the surface, there's lots of steps in that. It's highly uncertain, and it doesn't give really highly spatial information, but it does give useful information. So recently, and some of you might have known this, is you can buy all sorts of these low-cost sensors now, and these low-cost sensors say we're going to turn $20,000 or $30,000, really $100,000 to $200,000 into $30. Okay, and so we've been doing this for about 10 years. Lots of people are working on this, and it holds great promise. But so the reason that we would really like to use these sensors is we'd like to go from say 20,000 to 20. And we'd like to more accurately measure exposure because, for example, I forget exactly off the top of my head in Ahmedabad, but I think maybe there's one or two real-time sensors that stream out PM 2.5. I can't remember about the data quality off the top of my head, but it doesn't really represent the whole area. And you really want the whole area, and you like in people's houses too, to figure out what people's true exposure is. And so we really need to have more sensors, more highly spatialized information. And also, as I'll talk about later, you might decide in your house you're going to come up with a mitigation strategy, open or close the windows or filter your indoor air, and you really want to know how well your filters are working. So you really have to know what the PM 2.5 is. And then lastly, I think policymakers really need better information on air pollution, where the air pollution is coming, how bad it is, and where it's coming from. So we need these sensors for those reasons. But the problem is most of these sensors don't really work. They tend to need to be calibrated to the ambient environment they're in. Sometimes those calibrations degrade very quickly, or the instruments become dirty. And then they stream a heck of a lot of data, and probably as Vimal knows with the sensor in his sitting next to his office is, sometimes these things might be streaming 15-minute data. Imagine if you get, 30 of these things, 15-minute data, day in and day out, just QA/QCing the data is really, really, really time consuming and really complicated. Okay, so I'll say a few things about commercial options that have kind of started to look pretty good. As I'm going to talk about a few of these different sensors. This is a sensor made in India by Urban Sciences, by some of our collaborators. It's a wireless instrument, but most of these instruments kind of plus minus use the same sensor on the inside, and there's all sorts of different ways wirelessly to communicate information, and also some sensors that actually use solar energy, and you don't even have to power them. I'll just say we've made a bunch of them, and this is probably 7 or 8 years ago. We probably made about 500 of them. We're kind of not making them anymore because there's some really good companies, but you can, if there's people out there, you can make these yourselves. This is a Chinese sensor that works called the plant tower sensor, and you can make your backbone. This is sort of the Internet of Things, Arduino based. We actually use something called the Teensy, but it's like an Arduino controller. And one thing I would say that has happened in my lifetime that is so exciting, and being an engineer, this is so exciting, is this sort of Arduino type, microchip type technology where you can, and then the low cost sensors along with that you can put with them have really changed things a lot. And it went from 20 years ago thinking there would never be a low cost way of measuring air pollutants to now many different ways. So this is something that's just fantastic. And I think for any young people, who are listening, or if anybody has to encourage young people to do anything in their lives that's science or engineering related, they should really learn about these things. And I know high schools and middle schools are not teaching kids about this stuff. So we made a bunch of these sensors. And one thing I want to say about these sensors, so don't get overwhelmed with this plot here, but what this is a reference monitor in the bottom. It's called the T640, but it's a reference federal equivalent method reference monitor. And on the x-axis, this is these PM 2.5 sensors. And this is just if you do 1 minute, 1 hour, 6 hour aggregated measurements. But if you see, the point of the matter is, if you calibrate these sensors right, and there's several sensors now that could work like this. So you get these sensors, you want to use them for air quality. If you calibrate them, you get them to come within about 10% of the reference monitor. Now, embedded in this was a lot of work to figure out the way to calibrate them and some other corrections. But the bottom line is these sensors, if you get the right ones and you use them correctly, you can make them work really great. So with that said, so we this is a few years back, we got really interested in how all these sensors work. So we rolled out a 10 node, it's not a very big sensor network, but we just want to get our hands dirty to try to understand how they work. So we rolled out these plant tower sensors with Urban Sciences, our friends in Mumbai, and with IT Kanpur. So we put 10 nodes, these black dot or red dots are the nodes we put out. And these are the government monitors. And we did a lot of work. The government monitors are in really good shape. So the problem with doing this is, you put these sensors out there and then you're curious how they work. And as they go along, you have to put calibrations on them. The calibrations might change. They might become dirty. The lasers might lose some of their power. The photo detectors might change. So we became really enthralled with how would you maintain a sensor network and keep it going and try to do on-the-fly calibrations by constantly comparing everything with one another. And so what we came up with is now don't you got to step back and look at this. Truth be told, I don't understand all the nuances of it, but we work with some machine learning people, and we use a method called Gaussian process regression modeling. It's a machine learning process. Basically what it does is it teaches itself how all the sensors are related, and each sensor is related with each other, and each sensor is related with the reference nodes, and it puts calibrations on them. Okay. Point of this slide is there's methodologies that are pretty well understood in machine learning computer science that we can apply to this problem. And so we did that, and I just want to show you what this looks like. Up top, this is sort of 2-month averages, box and whiskers plots of the PM 2.5 for all the reference monitors along the x-axis. And these are calibrated low-cost sensor nodes, and they were located close to some of these. And basically, you see they give similar results around 100, 110, kind of same thing. And bottom line is I won't talk about it, but you can watch each day how these things calibration change. You can modify the calibrations, and you can do surveillance as we go. So the bottom line now, okay, yeah, okay, let's see. So I'm not going to say bottom line yet because I want to show a few more slides, and I'm going to do a quick summary and move on to the next part of my talk. So the cool thing about these sensors, so I guess part of it is the sensors. If you're careful, you get the right ones, they work well. You can calibrate them, you can roll them out, and you can keep an eye on them as you go. There's ways to do that. So we're feeling pretty good about that. We've also done some studies. So another thing that these sensors work great for, so surveillance, rolling them out, surveillance in your neighborhood or in your city. You can do them indoors if you want. But what we also did is we were wondering how well some interventions, filtration, indoor filtration works, for example. Now, it's hard to believe, but indoor filtration is a gigantuan business. It's billions of dollars a year, I believe, in China, for example. And people are filtering their indoor air all the time. And in India as well, it's growing. And in the US, people are filtering their indoor a lot as well. So the indoor filters are a huge business, but nobody really knows that the filters really work. And so hard to believe, but there really have been no studies done on how indoor filtration affects health. So we came up with a study. So now we have these sensors. Part of the problem was sensors are so expensive that we wouldn't buy, a bunch of $20,000 sensors and be able to put them indoors and outdoors and at 40 homes. For example. So now we have the sensors so we can assess how indoor filtration works. And all I'll say is we got 42 homes in Shanghai, and we would, for 2 weeks, filter the indoor air, then for 2 weeks or so, have a washout period, then for 2 weeks, have a non-filtered indoor environment. We'd have filter box running in each case, so people didn't know if there was a filter or not. And it was a really big study. We wrote a lot of papers about this. I don't want to talk about the details except this right here. Yeah, 2 things I'm going to show. Let's look at this left panel. This is particulate matter, PM 2.5 concentration. And this is in the bedrooms of, these are asthmatic children, actually, I should have said that. So what we have is here's the outdoor concentrations during the 2 periods I talked about when the filters were running and not running. And here is the in-bedroom concentration when the filters were not running and when the filters were running. Now, it turns out, on average, these children were spending about 12 hours a day in their bedrooms. We also had personal exposure monitors with them, but I won't talk about that. But these concentrations were somewhat representative of what they were exposed to. So anyway, About, generally speaking, indoor filtration, when done correctly, drop the concentration by half in these kids' bedrooms. And what the question is did that have any health effects? And so let me tell you what this is. This is, so these are all these things here. These were measurements done on the children of things that had to do with their respiratory function. And the one on the top is breathing out, called exhaled nitric oxide. And these ones are all tests of lung function. So if it's on the left of this, it means that there were positive benefits from having filtration and no filtration. And what we found is several of these dots are on the left. What we found is decreased respiratory inflammation and much, much better breathing in these children. So this is what, believe it or not, the first study showing that there isn't, that indoor filtration does have an impact. And these low-cost sensors allowed us to do this. So that's good news. So quick summary, low-cost, this is what I was going to summarize before. So the low-cost sensors, they're great options out there. It still is not necessarily easy, because if you really want to use them right, you potentially have to use some deep machine learning to calibrate them and do on-the-fly assessment of how well they're working. But what's really exciting is I think these sensors are they're being used widely now in people's homes, and I think increasingly they're going to be used in people's homes. And these things tell you how good your air quality is, and if you use the filtration intervention, how well your filters are working. So a few applications. I'm going to talk about another one in a minute, though. Okay, so check my time here. Okay, so these low-cost sensors work, but still you got to put them out in discrete places. So the real question is how can we fill in to get like a neighborhood level PM concentration level? And there's a few reasons you want that. You want that because you want to be able to to really get people's exposure. You really want to be able to know the air pollution concentrations at the neighborhood level. That's one thing. But the other thing is you really love high resolution maps of air quality, so that you could figure out where the sources are and potentially show those policymakers to make mitigation strategies for the high emitting sources. So I had mentioned satellites. The satellites typically are a few kilometers by a few kilometer boxes. They measure the top of the atmosphere radiance. So they tend not to give really good high resolution information about what's on the ground, the PM 2.5 concentration at the ground. But it turns out that there's been an innovation in satellites that are in the atmosphere too, that we might be able to use. Typically, as I said, let's see, we go to the third bullet. There's a company called Planet Lab. There's other companies, and they make these shoebox-sized satellites. They fly around in a constellation, and they take pictures over every location on Earth once a day at 3-meter resolution. So not only now we have daily images of these things, and it's really possible to glean information from those and maybe use those to get the surface level concentrations, and not these big swath 1 kilometer to 5 kilometer by 5 kilometer grids with radiance, and then try to turn the radiance into an optical depth and try to turn that into a PM 2.5 concentration. So I want to talk about that for a minute, because I think this is super duper cool. It has tons of applications, not just in air quality. So here's what some of these planet images look like. This is over Delhi. These are just a bunch of different images over Delhi. And so this is 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer boxes of the Planet Lab grid. And you can see a lot of information in this. I know Vimal's probably looking at this and saying, oh, I see a bunch of land use information and different reflectances. And maybe you're thinking a little bit about hydrology in here too. But you can tell, you can see structure in here, you can see the ground form, but you also see haziness kind of changes the way these images look. Okay. So when we first saw that, and to be honest, I meant to show this, but I couldn't find the image. The reason that I got really interested in this was from when I was in IT Gandhinagar doing a project I'll talk about at the end. And there's a huge trash and refuse dump, and it smokes and it burns. And I had just got access to Planet Labs data, so I went to Planet Labs and I could watch this plume coming over part of Ahmedabad, and I became really interested if we could use Planet Labs as a plume detector, which the answer is yes. So anyway, but I'm not going to talk about that today. So, but when you see these images, you would say to yourself, looks like there's information in here about the haziness. Can't we somehow figure out how to train images with ground level PM 2.5 and then use images alone to get ground level PM 2.5? And so, so here's what we did. And I'll make a point about this in a minute, but So you can take the images and you see the left that you have an image, and you can use something called a convolutional neural network to mine information from the images, and it mines how the pixels are related to their neighbors and related all to one another in an image. And then you can combine that here as we move down. So this is the convolutional neural network, and then we can combine that with meteorology, because meteorology does, I won't talk too much about it, but it has an effect on the air pollution as well. And then you can use something called a random forest, which looks for relationships and everything. And you can train with the ground level PM 2.5 concentration. And you can train the images to ground level PM 2.5, and you can find the key features in the images and the meteorology combined that affect PM 2.5. And then once you do that, then you can use the images themselves to estimate PM 2.5. And I won't go into the huge details of this. This is very detailed. And a point I'm going to make is that that I have found is that all this that I'm showing you right here, I don't really fully understand it, to be honest. This is, in my opinion, hardcore computer science, deep learning. And I think people like us, I'll make a point at the end, we have to get the true deep machine learning people in computer science to work with us environmental scientists together. And I think that's where all the excitement is. And I think that one difficult thing for me has been that I don't like to ever do anything that I don't fully understand. And I have given that up, and I've decided I'm going to get people who are really good at stuff and they're the ones who fully understand it. We'll work together. And I think that is how this has worked. And if you look at this, this didn't come out very good, but let's look at the bottom middle panel here. So this is it says test data set. So what we do is we go to Delhi, and we have all those, we have these stations, what is it, the 20 or so government stations, and we trust that data because we looked at it carefully. And we train we get all the images 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer over each of the stations. And then we take all that data, and we use about 50% of that data, and we train our images. And then we take the other 50% of the data that wasn't trained, images that weren't trained, and then we estimate PM 2.5 and compare it to the station. And so, if you look, this is what we get, this middle bottom panel error. Well, it depends which one you like, but I like the sort of, because it looks lower, the normalized mean error is about 20%. And so we can estimate the PM 2.5 in these grid cells 20% just using training. And the way the training is, a way to think about it is, you know how, this is the way it's explained to me, you know how like images can, you can take an image and you can find somebody's face in an image, right? And take an image, and that image says Vimo Mishra. Vimo can't go anywhere because we can track him, because if he's ever in a camera, we can find him. And so this is the same technology used on these images that we're using now, the same technology that tries to mine all the information in an image and figure out what the meaning of it is. And then you can do things like, I'm not gonna talk too much about that, but then, so we did that, we applied this. This is the Delhi area. This is the PM 2.5 map over Delhi. We made a PM 2.5 map using the satellite images. What's really cool about this is then we made a hotspot detector. I won't talk about that, but basically uses something called, I think it's called like normalized contrast minimization. Again, this is something those machine learning guys did. It's the same thing that, I don't know if you guys have this, but like when I take a picture with my phone, the picture always looks better than the real scene. And that's because a lot of the phones use a very specific algorithm to make contrast higher and correct contrast throughout the image, so things kind of jump out. And if you look here, so here is the red spots are high concentrations, the blue spots low. And then what we did is so this is like, if you look at number 12, here's a region, a neighborhood number 12, we're right here. And you see the lowest to highest is about a 20 microgram per cubic meter difference just in a neighborhood. Here's 18, I believe that's the airport. You have these hot spots and cool spots. So when you do this, you can find these hot spots, these areas where you have unnecessarily high concentrations. We call these localized hot spots, okay? So we have a lot of, so the idea is, so let's say we're going somewhere in India, I'm gonna make it up. I'm going to say Chandigarh, but I'm sure Chandigarh has sensors there. But let's say you go to Chandigarh, let's say there's no sensors there, and you roll out a sensor network. Okay, so you get some info, and then maybe you have one reference monitor and you use Gaussian process regression model to get trustworthy data. Then you take the satellites and you train the satellites to some of those sensors and make sure you got that. And then when that's good, all of a sudden you can make daily maps of spatial concentration. And you can also make daily maps of hotspots. And then you can see how those things change over time. You can get really much better estimates of exposure and much better estimates of sources, okay? So that's kind of where we're going. I want to talk a little bit, though, there's a theme running through this. So you got aerosols in the atmosphere, they're depositing to the Taj Mahal. They have all different color. And this is Chinmay and I, and this is recently, we worked together. This is maybe the first time I was at IIT Gandhinagar. See the solar panels there. We noticed they were very dirty on the surface. So we did some experiments. One thing we noticed, I've showed these quite a bit, is this the electricity generation. And then we cleaned the panels and the electricity generation tends to double when the loading is this high. And this loading was over about a month. So it showed us that in some places, at least, maybe that this is a really important deal. So what we did is we ran a climate model that estimates the particulate matter, then we could estimate the fluxes, and we compared it with Gandhinagar. But the long story short is we call this soiling. This is the fraction of loss of solar energy from solar panels due to pollution. There's an ambient effect because the particles in the atmosphere blocking sun. There's an effect of the deposited particles, and you go somewhere like here, sort of in northern India, and that effect is about a 15 to 20% per year. Loss of solar energy can be as high as 40%. And I just wanted to touch on this. I'm not going to talk a lot about this. This is something that is really taken off. But what's interesting is the loss is about $15 billion a year US. And in India, that loss is about $1 billion. And so India, exponentially rising solar energy. The air pollution in India is costing an extraordinary amount of money. Extraordinary amount of money. And so we're working on this. We're modeling this. We made some sensors, just like our low-cost sensors that sit on the ground and can measure this effect. And we're working with a lot of partners who have solar farms throughout the world to better characterize this. And one thing that's interesting, though, is this just is amazing. Going back to Planet Labs, you can also look from space with the Planet Labs satellites day to day to figure out if solar panels are getting dirty. This is pretty cool. I don't know, Vimal, if you've seen this before, but it's a lot like, land use, looking for land use and things like that, in hydrological parameters. But you can see here's a solar farm here in the red, green, and blue. Those are three of the, different wave bands. And here's solar panels, right here you see them, and there's the background. So as the solar panels get dirtier, they start to look more and more like the background. And so what we did is we have a collaborator in Pune, and he gave us some solar data. And so this is the estimated, this is the true solar production, and this is predicted solar production from our satellite model that we made and trained with the data. And it's pretty amazing. So you can also use these satellites for surveillance of solar farms. It's kind of mind-blowing to me. Lastly, let's see, and I don't want to talk too long because I'd love to take some questions. Is one of the things that's really important in all of this. So I want to come back to health for a minute. And so what I've talked a little bit about is, environmental factors. I've talked about air quality. So let's say you have air quality and you're measuring air quality. And one of the big problems with being involved in what I do is you can measure. Well, I'm an engineer, so we measure air quality. But as I said, it was hard to believe people are spending billions and billions of dollars a year filtering indoor air, with no proof that indoor air has any impact on human health, just maybe people feeling like it probably should. So increasingly, what we really need to do is we need to take these environmental factors, air or water quality, I'm talking about air today, and then we need to figure out, we need to link them with health outcomes to really be sure that, which contaminants are affecting health. And then we need to watch how people's health presumably gets better or not over time by making measurements of health proxies. And normally these health records are really hard to get, but there's a whole bunch more of really fascinating. So big companies like Google and Microsoft, they're already doing this internally, but they're trying to take things like mining social media, web browsing, and also personal device information. Got this right here. It's my Garmin watch. It measures heart rate and stuff like that. They're taking this information. You can put that together in real time, and you can figure out if people are happy or sad or how their health is. I'll show you in a minute. And then you can compare that as you do interventions to, say, improve air quality. So for example, this probably a bunch of you guys know how to do this, but I love this. This is Google Trends. I look at Google Trends all the time. This takes 3 minutes to do this. You get on Google Trends, you type in the last 5 years or whatever. This is the last 3 years. Then you can choose India. Choose India here. And then you can type in cough. Shoot, didn't work on air pollution. So cough is blue. So this is September. This is over several years. So cough, here's the trends and people searching for cough, and you see that it goes, it goes up in the winter, spring, down, summer, up, down. And then you look at air pollution. This is people talking about air pollution. And then, of course, I didn't plot this, but I have another plot with the AOD over this, or PM 2.5 goes right along with PM 2.5. What this says is that people are constantly talking about these things and searching these things, and these things go right along with what we know the air quality to be. So in other words, there's lots of information about how people are feeling in what they're searching. And one thing we did, and this isn't the most beautiful plot, but so we got really fascinated by this a few years back. So we maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So we mined Twitter, and we mined Twitter over Delhi, and this is over about a 2-year period. And the green curve here is people tweeting about air pollution. The red one is about air quality, and the blue one is about PM 2.5. So you see that people are talking all about air pollution. Of course, this is in India and Twitter. I can't remember. There's like 1 million Twitter users that we could access in Delhi. Bottom line, though, and then there's also there's also health information about people's mental and physical health in these. So there's the real. I think the future is going to be mining data and text information in regions in real time. So we can link not just the air quality, but we can link what people's health proxy is. In this case, the proxy or the health proxies are what people are talking about on Twitter and in mining and in web searches and things. So, but we're constantly, I think we have to figure out how to get real-time health information. I think that's key. The public is just not as responsive. As you guys know, in India, you can tell people over and over again that the PM 2.5 is high. But one idea is you got to show people that their health is really being affected, and maybe that would make people spring into action more. This is in the U.S. I just wanted to say this is people tweeting right here in this upper panel. You see that was a smoke event that came over us, and people started tweeting like mad about the smoke and about PM 2.5. So even in the U.S., everywhere we see this, and it happens. We're out west as well. We're mining data out west for the wildfires just out of our own curiosity, and it happens very similarly. The other thing, I just want to come back to this, and I think that's my last few slides here. And yeah, perfect. So I want to come back to talking about satellite imagery just for a minute. And one thing, as I mentioned, the reason that we can mine the satellite images is because all this facial recognition work that's been done. So we've also been combining, this is hard to believe, it sounds kind of spooky, but we've been combining with our low-cost sensor boxes. We've combined cameras. And then when people walk by, we take pictures of their faces and stuff, and then what you can do is you can take those facial recognition images, and you can figure out if people are happy or sad or none of the above. And my dream before all this, before all the COVID lockdown happened, was that maybe on IIT Gandhinagar's campus, or maybe in places in Delhi, we would have some of these cameras, and we watched this over a few seasons, and we would show that as air quality got better, people were becoming much less happy through the facial recognition. And that clearly, and since we've started doing this work, there have been a few papers that have come out that have suggested that people become their mental health is much less well when they're exposed to high levels of air pollutants. But anyway, we wanted to do this, and if you look so we did this in our student union. We've done this a few places on our campus, and just see if we could do it. So it's pretty interesting. This is just what this says is about 90 to 99% of the time, if someone walks by and we see their face, if we detect their face, we detect their sentiment, if they're happy or sad or none of the above. And this is the distribution of joy of the people that we detected. And I don't know, I guess it says very unlikely that there's any joy of the people walking around Duke's student union. Pretty interesting. We have a lot of data points here. I think it's because, maybe because the students, when we did this, were just in there briefly, and they were between classes, and I don't know, maybe it wasn't time to be very happy. Chose a different time. Okay, so anyway, I'm just going to touch on that. We have a lot of ongoing work on that, and I just want to put that idea out there. And I would, tell everybody, if you can work on this, it's a great thing to work on. If you want to contact me, I can help you. We can help you get going on it. Mining Twitter is not so complicated, as some of you may know. Lastly, last few minutes, I forgot. Yeah, I want to be done now, but a couple more minutes. One of the things, lastly, is this was something Chinmay and I did, but I think that increasingly, I think that our educational system has to radically change over the next 20 years. I think kids go to college and we teach them a lot of things that they don't really need to know about. But I think we have to teach kids much, especially in science and engineering, we have much more practical things, and we have to make the education much more interesting and exciting. And I think part of this is hands-on research and education. This is an undergraduate project, and Vima was part of this too, with students from IT Gandhinagar and students from Duke. And we went over Christmas break. We all missed Christmas at home, but we went over Christmas break from the US. And this was a trash and refuse project, and the students were pretty amazing. They went and picked up trash and refuse. We burned different kinds of trash and refuse to look at their emissions. We all learned a lot, and we had a really, really good time. This was one of the neighborhoods, and I have a lot of fond memories of this trip in many, many ways. And our students from the US, and this was the students from the US and the Indian students, they did lots of social media, put together a bunch of information on this. I would say that, I'm in contact with many of the US students who talk about this all the time. And I guess the one thing, as an aside, one of the things that I thought was so amazing is there's all these US students who had not been exposed to vegetarian food. And they were all kind of worried about it. A few kids in my group were worried about it. And of course, food in Gujarat is totally amazing. And so I think that this was one of the things. Every time I talk to people, they talk about how great it was to go to Gujarat and IIT's campus and how amazing the food was, and then how friendly the people were everywhere. And I think, and then the Indian students that came and visited us too. I don't think their trip was as exciting, but it was a fantastic thing. I wish I could do this 2 or 3 times a year. One thing they found, this is last year, so they did write a paper, our students. They flew drones over this trash and refuse pile I was telling you guys about, and they wrote a paper about it. I think they were all really excited about that. We actually let them do it. Us faculty advisors had very little to do with that paper. We wanted them to do it, and they did a beautiful job. Okay, so yeah, 2 more slides. So as I said, kind of the second part, I think we have to do more hands-on learning. We have to figure out how to engage undergraduate students more. I think that, and that engagement hopefully can involve the local community and our local communities, and then some international local communities as well. And I would, I think involving children, I know we had lots of kids helping us all the time in Gandhinagar, and it just showed me that, that young people are super excited when they see people doing hands-on things and they understand what they're doing. And then, of course, I think constantly we have to all work together internationally. I think that's something that's very important now. Okay, it's my last slide. My last slide, I just want to say one last thing. I think if I was a young person getting into this, I think, so we have the environmental science and engineering people like me and Vimal and Chinmay and Sachi and my collaborators. But we have to connect with the deep machine learning people, because right now we're generating so much data, environmental data, that we really need. There's so many tools that computer science has that we can use. Now, the problem is hardly anybody is doing this. So my machine learning people, they explain to me that a lot of the environmental engineering and science machine learning stuff going on now is not so good, because it's mostly done by people like me trying to do machine learning. We have to engage the machine learning people. They tend not to they don't think they want to be involved with us right now, because they're all worried about getting their students really high-paying jobs with, at least in the US, with Google and Amazon. And I'm sure in India, there's probably a huge deficit in the number of machine learning students that are needed. So it's been very difficult to get these people to want to be involved in our problems. But I think when they work together, they'll see, we've already had some very exciting research going on with us, with the machine learning people. And lastly, it's funny, the machine learning people who have been working with us, the papers that are most cited are the ones that they're working on with us. So we keep pointing out to them that they can write all these machine learning papers, but they can get great applications in the environmental sciences that are very impactful. So I'm going to stop it right there. I'm going to put my acknowledgement slide out, but I'm not going to say anything about it. And I think I would love to take some questions if we have time.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike, for this fabulous talk.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.